How's it going, everybody, and welcome to another video on how to write production grade React application. This is a course taught by Brian Holt, a software engineer that has previously worked at Reddit, Netflix, Microsoft, and he's currently the VP of product at SQLite Cloud. Now, the whole goal of this course is to learn how to write these production ready applications by looking at the advanced techniques such as code splitting, server-side rendering, transition, as well as tools like Tailwind, Redux, and TypeScript. In particular, we're going to look at the last advanced technique, testing, which is a very sensitive topic and a topic that a lot of developers love to do. I'm joking. But the whole idea here is that once you learn how to do this kind of test, which is something that you actually, developers like me, developers including myself, I don't like to write tests, and I want to know everything that is needed to write the minimal amount of tests, and that is write tests, or by following is the Brian Holt methodology from his experience, write tests that cover is user stories. So write tests like the user is going to use your applications, user stories. Don't test UI. So because this is something that's going to change a lot, so most of the time it's going to break that. So don't test UI, test features rather than implementations. And you must develop the habit to eliminate tests as you move on. So all tests or flaggy tests. The only test that is acceptable is those that use Playwright, Cypress, or Puppeteer when you have all of this end-to-end testing. When you once the user go through this, when he fill this form, then he click there, you're going to show this data. So all of these different steps on your user, you can or you might use Playwright or Playwright, Playwright or Puppeteer to do that kind of thing, and that's the only place where you can say, okay, this is flaggy test. End-to-ends are always tend to be flaggy tests. They are expensive. That's one of the reasons you should be very careful about what you're going to test, and if that's something that is truly important for that. Okay. So the idea of looking now at testing is to, once we talk about that, look at what are the tools that we can use right now as part of our testing environment, testing development. So there are companies that actually are enforcing to do this TDD, test-driven development. If you are right to write tests for bugs that fix those bugs, so the benefit of doing that is that you can make sure that you write a test for that bug, and you don't have to do any regression, any kind of regressions for that. So you guarantee that you actually fixed that bug, and you wrote a test for that. So now that we look at this huge overview of what is the testing and some of the recommendations from Brian Holt, now we look at what are the tools that we're going to use here. So for example, VTest, React tool, or testing library, as well as Happy Done. What is this? First, Jest was a Facebook product that now it is open source, it's community driven, which is something that I really like. but it started as this test environment, which is inspired by Jasmine, where now Vite is this next spiritual successor that want to make things much more faster, and that you don't need to rely on something or another pipeline, especially when you're deploying your application on development environment, staging, or production. So you have now one server that handles the build step as well as the test step. So that's why they use Vite, and that's pretty compelling. Because now here you can use is yes, pretty much like when you're going to write your yes test. Okay. And then we look at now the testing libraries with React, which is the replacement of Enzyme, and Enzyme is something that focus on testing React components, because before that we have nothing, and now it's better because it's actually solved a lot of pain points in there when testing your React component. And this is a library was developed at Airbnb, and now we have is the testing library uh, that allow us is this bunch of helper functions for testing React components, which is great. It's totally great. Okay. It's totally great. Okay. Now, the thing here, okay, is that then we look at something called is DOM or Happy DOM, which is a minimal version, it's a minimalistic versions and lightweight from GSDOM, which is our no environment. Sorry, which is a no applications to run our sorry, it's a no implementation of the DOM. Okay, so you can run tests without even spin up your browser, which is a good thing since doing that is very slow. So if you want to do that, you can go with Playwright, Puppeteer. But the thing with Happy Done, this minimalistic this minimalistic no implementation of GSDOM, let's gonna take a look here, Happy Done, is that I love to run tests that actually are fast. Okay. Happy Done with a graphic user interface. Exactly. It's a no implementation of the DOM. So Happy Done with a graphical user interface. This is not a full feature implementation of the DOM like GSDOM. It's a way much lightweight version of that. Uh, but for most of use case, you would like to go with Happy DOM, which is something that is much more faster. As you can see, DOM feature is like custom elements web component, declarative shadow DOM, mutation observer, tree walker, fetch API, and much more. So this works with Vite, Bond, Jest, testing library, Google Lead Elements, and that kind of thing. Exactly. Source graph. Understand and write code blazing fast. Mm-hmm. 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 Interesting. Okay. Understanding the right code placing fast. Source graph. Source graph. Okay. Well, in any case, as you can see here, mm-hmm, mm-hmm, Sequoia red endpoint graph. Interesting. Anyway, but this is Happy Dog. Okay. So yeah, this is what is Happy Dog. So Happy Dog is blazing fast, and I really love the being fast, especially when you write your test, which is good, totally good. Again, this is a minimalistic version of GSDOM, which is a more fully fledged DOM implementations. Most of the time for your use case, Happy Dog is good enough for writing tests like that. And after all, the philosophy behind writing your test is to write tests that break user story, not implementation details. Sometimes it is quite hard to write that kind of test, but as you can see, the more you test your implementation details by mocking and spying and that kind of thing, when you need to change your implementation for something better, okay, or for something different, now you have to also write your test. That's one of the reasons, based on this recommendation from Brian Holt, when he say, don't write or don't test your UI. First of all, write tests like the user tests your application. Like the user will test your applications. So hey, if I click a button here, what will happen? If I do this, what will happen? You know, write tests to test write tests like user stories. Okay, that's one. Do not test UI because after all, that's gonna change a lot, and that's not something that doesn't provide any value of that. What is value is the user stories. What is the abilities that this application will provide? Okay, so don't test UI. Also, don't test implementations. Okay, I think there's something here. Uh, don't test implementations. I just only cares about if the user story breaks. If a user click here, if that breaks, that won't do what is expected. Okay. Uh, yeah, try not to test UI because this is something that changes a lot. Okay. When trying to fix a bug, write a test that failed that, okay, and then write the necessary code to fix that test. So this is something good because now you will have is a so now that you guarantee that that bug was fixed, and also leave a test behind so regression doesn't happen. Okay, so this bug doesn't pop up again, which is something that, as you can see, well, it is what it is, bro. And what really happened is that in most companies, bigger companies, well, people out there say, oh, that makes a lot of sense. Oh, I think this is what it is. And product owner and product manager is like there for barely doing the things. Uh, Most of the time, they might work in other projects as well. Who knows? And especially in this digital landscape, we never know. But it's okay. Okay, that's what it is. And you as a developer, this is the thing that they're gonna hire you for. That, hey, I want you to help me to write this production-ready React applications. Okay, I want you to understand is the hooks in advance. What is Tailwind? What is this techniques like code splitting and server-side rendering? I want you to understand how to do that. Also, I want to have self-documented code, know how to use TypeScript. What is the pain point of TypeScript? As well as understand low priority and high priority re-rendering, especially for React applications. What is Redux? How can we benefit from Redux? What is the value proposition of Redux? How we can implement Redux in production scale applications, as well as testing. So again, the TLDR of testing, especially the value proposition of testing, which is a methodology that Brian Holt used, is that write user tests or write your test like user story will navigate your app. That's the core, and that's something that you must enforce to product owners and the kind of people like that. It's like no. This story that I'm going to, or this test that I'm going to write is for a user story. Okay, for example, as a driver, I want to, or as a user, I want to log into my application. I want to drag and drop this, that kind of thing. Test your feature, your user story, not the implementations. Because if you want to change how you do that user story, you don't have to rewrite your applications or you rewrite your tests. That's one. Second, try not to test your UI because it's constantly changing. So I just only care that user story breaks. The other is when you're trying to fix a bug, write a test that failed that, and then write the necessary code to pass that test, because it will serve to a couple things. Not only that you fix that bug and you write a test for that, but also it avoids regressions. And the other is develop the habit of deleting tests and or fix tests, or fix or delete flaky tests. Okay, or fix or delete flaky tests. Completely. Expect for end-to-end testing. So the idea of getting the habit of deleting tests or fixed tests especially flaky tests, except for this end-to-end testing when you really need to take care about that. Uh, it's because this will help you to get rid of flaky or not unnecessary code or user stories or flaky tests that doesn't show you what is really about and what is failing. Okay. So TDD is slow and quite necessary according to Brian Hall. Then we look at what are the main components or the anatomy of our tests, okay, especially of our tooling. So we look at VTest. We already mentioned that. The testing library, okay, which is the replacement of something called Enzyme that allow us or provides a bunch of utility functions for React components, as well as our GSDOM, or in this case HappyDOM, which is a lightweight implementation of GSDOM, a no implementation of the DOM. Okay, so this is something great, especially HappyDOM, because we can run our tests without speeding up a browser, which is a good thing because they are slow, unless you want to do end-to-end testing. Playwrights or Puppeteer, again, all of these end-to-end testings are very flaky, are expensive. That's why you need to be precisely or need to know which you want, what are the features that you want to build, what are the features you want to test. So in any case, that's what it is. Okay, and here we're going to now test a component. Testing a component. There we go.
Did not make that up. That's what it's called. It's a.
Okay.
So we're going to go into source here, create a directory called __ tests __. What's the deal with the double underscore, aka the dunder?
So let's go to create. So let's go to create a test folder like this. So, so what's the deal? What's the deal with underscore, with double underscore test, aka the dunder? And the dunder in Brewery is the Li, or the substance that sit at the bottom of of a Li of it's a substance that sit at the bottom of the Li, or of a Li, of a vessel, or it's a substance that sits on the bottom of a bottle, okay, after the after the dunder. From boiled sugar. Okay, is a Li, or is the thick Li or is the subtle is the substance that sit on the bottom after boiling sugar cane juice used in distillations of rum. That's something interesting. In Spanish we call this la gamelaza, the dunder. Me parece interesante. The dunder. The dunder. Alright. Okay. The dunder. Okay. Okay. So the dunder is this substance that sits at the bottom of a lid of a bottle after boiling sugarcane juice in the distillation of rum. Okay. The dunder. The thunder in Spanish, bro. No. Melaza de rum. The thunder. The thunder. Exactly. Oh my God, they use that as a currency? Facundo Bacardi. Holy moly. Anyway, but after all this is the dunder is this melaza. So the dunder is what is now this, aka this double underscore. So what's the deal of the double underscore, aka the dunder, or this substance that sit at the top, this substance that sit at the bottom of a lid of a bottle after boiling sugar cane used in the fermentation or the distillation of rum. Makes a lot of sense. The dunder.
I did not make that up. That's what it's called. It's a Python thing.
It is a Python thing. I didn't make it up. Okay, it is a Python thing. I didn't make it up. It is a real thing.
It's a Python thing that means the name of this folder is special. It's magical. It's magical because anything inside of there is assumed to be a test.
Exactly. The name of the folder is magical, and it is assumed to be a test, aka the dunder.
In other words, if you create that folder, vtest will assume any file that you put in there is a test, and it will run it as part of your test suite.
So if you use it, vtest will run any test you define under such folder. There is another way to do this, which is defining your test. Okay, there's another way to do this, which is defining your test or spec right after your component, but it is gonna depend on style. In my case, I'll prefer use test folder, since any times I want to search there using VS Code, I can do that putting test, but this is not an impediment because you can also do that test and then pass the proper name for that. So
you don't have to do it this way. The other thing that you can do is outside of in here, both of those will also be assumed to be a test. So either one of those is fine. What do? I do both, because I don't know why, but I just always have. pet.test.js, which is in the test directory. I can tell you why I do it. I like moving the tests out of the main directory, so I don't have this like super cluttered directory. And then I like putting test in there because now if I search for files, I can just search for test and I'll see all of my test files. That's my reason. Either one of those is fine. One of those is fine, whatever you want to do. You can also just go into your vtest configuration and say, these are my tests. And
and another thing, also let's going to create is okay. Also let's going to create there you go. So also let's going to create is yep. So also let's going to create if our script in package.json, which in this case is with vtest. All right. So right now let me take a look at the code here. That's right. Let me save this. And here we're gonna do is on the package.json. Let me close all of this. And on the package.json here, I want to add is another test, which is the test for that. When you say the test, we can test this by saying npm t, which is a shorthand for npm run test. And that's right. As you can see, no test file found existing with code 1, but everything went as suspected. Okay. Cool. Cool. All right. Okay. Great. So now let me take a look at the course. I'm taking notes out of the videos.
Well, that works as well. Okay. So pet.test.js, we're going to import, expect, and test from
This is one of
vtest.
the things that I really love of this. As a way
Import
to
render
say, hey,
from
this actually
at
comes
testing
from the
library
test.
/React.
I don't want you to assume
And import
global
pet
variables here. It's like
from
something that you might find in context like Node or JavaScript, like that. No. Let's gonna make this explicit as possible.
/pet. And sorry, this has to be pet.test.jsx, not JS. Okay, test. Put a useful message here of what it's actually testing. Displays a default thumbnail. Cool. And this takes in an async function. I always make these async because they can be, and then I can do a wait in here if I want to. I don't even know if I'm awaiting anything in here. I am, but I always make these async just by default. I'm going to say const pet equals render pet, like that. And then I'm going to say const pet thumbnail should be equals await pet.find by test ID
Okay.
thumbnail.
That's great because it's by find by test ID. Is like you're gonna put this data test tag to your test, so you can now run your test without any collision. You don't have to rely on, for example, IDs or things that can change. So this is the particularly attribute that you want to put to your React components or your DOM elements that are relevant for your test.
Expect pet thumbnail.
And again, once you do this behind the scenes, it's not only going to run that file, but also going to say, hey, is this pet component, is this something called that is JSX? Okay, now let me mount this component. Not only mount that, but also take a look at all of this inner component or this HTML element that is getting rendered there.
To contain none.jpg. And then
display a default thumbnail.
Then with vtest, one of these things that it does, as opposed to jest, which we did not have to do before, vtest is actually going to take your test suite and run it in parallel so it can go even faster. So make sure you're just at the end of this, you're just calling unmount as a none.jpg. And then with vtest, one of these things that it does, as opposed to jest, which we did not have to do before, vtest is actually going to take your test suite and run it in parallel so it can go even faster.
Okay, that's another interesting here. Now it's going to create our file here, which is one particular way of how you can do this. Your source here and there, so follow me along here like so. You got it, because here is when you say folder underscore test underscore, okay, and inside of here we're gonna define is our test, which is pet.spec.jsx, or you can also pass the name test. Okay, both of them are valid. It is important to follow is this convention here, like pet in plural. Here, you got it.
So make sure you're just at the end of this, you're just calling unmount. So you need to clean up after yourself as well.
Okay, so what we're gonna do here is something that is very, very descriptive, and I really love being descriptive, especially with my code, because I can declare, I can let, as an author, I can define the intent of the code that I'm about to write. So it's not prone to error or ambiguity, which is deadly, especially if you're writing code. So here you're gonna call this vtest, okay, which we're gonna get is our test as well as our expect, okay. We also need to call something from the testing library. Testing library React. Okay, remember that this is our helper functions for our React component, and here we want to get the render, okay, and also the component we want to test, which in our case is the pet. All right, because we're exporting inside default, we can get this as pet. Okay, good. Now it is time to define our test. What is going to run? What is the code that is going to run our environment, or this no implementation of the DOM, this minimalistic version of the no implementation of our DOM from GSDOM. And here's by putting is a test. So here in the test, you need to define here is the user story. Remember to test user story, not implementation details. So in this case, that I want to display is thumbnail with none, no, or a default thumbnail. So display a default thumbnail. Okay. Here we are using always the async because it allows me to roll my code in async, even if it is needed or not. That's a force of habit. Here we're going to say, I want you to now get the pet here, okay, and call this helper function. What we're going now to use is the pet for that. And here there's no need to put it here. We can use just only, use the pet here, okay. It actually auto import that, no problem. So here what we're saying is that, hey, this component, let's go to add some helper functions that allow us to make it easy to test this user story, to see if we're showing is a default state or a default thumbnail. So then is when we say, okay, let's now get an ID or assign an ID to verify if we already have a thing there, which is const, this pet which is pet thumbnail, and this is from pet dot I prefer to put this as lowercase here. All right, so there is no confusion here. So pet dot get all by test ID. I think it is get all by test or find, in this case, not get all, is like find by text ID, or find by ID, find by test ID, which is the thumbnail, something that we're gonna see how we're going to connect that thumbnail, because this is an async operation, because this is something that now it has to wait to find that element. We have to wait for that, okay? Because now we're talking to the down element, okay? So you need to wait for that to get, if that exists or not. So if that exists with pet thumbnail, I want now to run an exception. Expect the actual message here, which is an assertion. Expect the thumbnail, or expect the pet.thumbnail.source. As you can see here, it will expect is, even though it's telling you, it will expect any or a string, okay? It's much better to work with single data type here. So pet thumbnail dot pet thumbnail dot pet thumbnail dot source, or that, yeah, pet thumbnail dot, because here we want is to get is the source element, okay? If there is a element there, pet thumbnail dot source. So we expect that this contain is a 0 value, okay, or none, or to contain and a string here, which is non-GPG, okay? Because now vtest is running tests in parallel, something they're going to add that, because now vtest can run tests in parallel, something that we don't have with Jest, okay? We need now to do is to unmount that pet. So leave that, remove from the DOM. Pet unmount. Pet.unmount here.
So, this is not working yet. That's intentional, just so you know. But this is kind of the methodology that I'm thinking of. I'm going to go render something. I'm going to go find the thumbnail, and I'll talk about this test ID in just a second. And then I'm going to make sure that the source contains none if I don't give it anything. You can imagine that, you know, I get a ticket reported from a user, like, hey, you have broken images on your homepage for pets that don't have images. What's up with that? I can go write this test, and then I can go fix it. And now I have a guarantee that I know I have fixed it, and I can just leave this in my testing suite to make sure that it doesn't regress again, right? I can go write that, you know, I get a ticket reported from a user, like, hey.
Okay. So for example, the pet.test.gsx, okay? So here, for example, I get a ticket from the user, like, hey, we are having problems with default image.
You have broken images on your homepage for pet.
Hey, we're having problems with broken image with your, exactly. Hey, we're having problems with broken image with your homepage. What's up? Which homepage? Pets? What's up with that? What's up with that?
That don't have images. What's up with that? I can go write this test, and then I can go fix it, and now I have a guarantee that I know I have fixed it, and I can just...
Exactly. So now I write this test and fix it, so now I can have a guarantee that I wrote a test that fixed it, so we don't have to do a regression. Okay, so we don't have to do a regression. In other words, like, hey, what's that? It's showing again.
Leave this in my testing suite to make sure that it doesn't regress again, right? That's the idea here. Let's go test or talk about this find by test ID. So open your pet.jsx, not CSX, JSX, pet.jsx here. Here on the thumbnail.
On
here.
the thumbnail, the image.
I want to give this a test ID, so I'm going to give it a, what is it, data test ID? Yes. Data-test ID equals thumbnail.
So now in our component, I can write the code to fix that bug, which is pet.jsx. Okay. Pet.jsx. And here we say, hey, let's take a look now at the pet.jsx. And say things like data. Okay, because this is what it needs to. Data test ID. And here's when you can pass is the value that we're going to look. Thumbnail. And with that, now we can make sure that, well, we actually is, if there is no image here, which is exactly what we're doing, if there is no image here, well, I want you to show is this thing, okay, that contain non-GPG for that. Again, we are testing its user story, not implementation. And then, if I run my test, npm test, you can see ping, it say, hey, it failed. Okay. Display a default thumbnail. Non-GPG. Thumbnail. Thumbnail. Which is thumbnail. Okay. Thumbnail. So initial state with thumbnail is empty like that. So we're passing is this. So in the path thumbnail source, the must contain that. On the source here is supposed to contain that. And then we say pet unmount. It's a kind of read property of undefined reading length. In the case of this image.length. Okay. But so the thing here is I was saying, hey, pet thumbnail and wait for find by test ID. This is the thumbnail, and he was saying this. For some reason, it's like our pet component here. You are assuming that we're passing something, but we are not. Not at all. Okay.
How about this I dash selector or something like that. What's nice about using specifically the test ID, one, it expresses this is being tested, right, to a future person that's reading pet.tsx or JSX. It's also saying that later, if I change how this UI works, I can just move what this is attached to, right? Let's say it moved over here. I would just move it over there, and all of a sudden it's testing this instead of testing that. It makes your test work independently of HTML and CSS structure.
Mm-hmm.
That's good. It's good.
So test ID. So data test ID thumbnail, which is here. So for example, if we take a look at our code on our pet, so adding so adding yeah. So adding pet yep. Mm-hmm. So adding pet test. So adding data test ID as attribute is great because if the UI change, we can just put that in the relevant, exactly, we can put that in the relevant HTML element. So this is making our test more robust by being independent of HTML or CSS attributes.
To decouple those where possible. Doing data dash test ID allows you to do that. Cool. We are still.
But it tells me that when I run that test, it says, something went wrong. That's what it's telling me. That's what it's telling me here. Like, hey, something went wrong. Okay, it's like, hey, this image.length is like, I'm expecting to receive is image here. I'm expecting to receive is image as props. Okay. So image.length exists, which in our case is that. Is this what a proper test?
Getting closer, but we're not quite there. Let's try running npm test and see what happens. I think we're still gonna fail. Why
exactly. It's failing because
so
we're not need to
this
pass.
already caught a bug for us. Cannot read properties of undefined length. If I don't give it any images.
Exactly. If I don't give any image here,
then the images.length there is going to fail because you're trying to call .length on undefined. Cool, I already caught a bug. Let's go fix it.
Okay. So when run your test, okay. So now when you run your test, npm, like npm, just npm test, now it throw an error here. It throw an error here. So now, okay, cool. It caught a bug. It caught a bug. Now let's fix it. Exactly. Which means that, well, in this particular case, we say, hey, if image does not exist, okay, then you're going to pass this. This is what you're going to assign that. Which means that when we run our test again, it's still failing, right? Because its image length failed. It's a reading length cannot read property of undefined length. So you can say is that, hey, if that exists, its image exists and length as well. So now you can run our test. Use href may be used only in the context of router component. Or you can say is image length does not exist. Okay. That may be one way to solve this.
So go back to pet.jsx, and instead of saying images.length, we're going to say images and.
So if the image exists in image.length, it is now going to tell, well, that's great, but use href may use only in the context of router component. So okay. Use ref may be used only in the context of router component. So now we need is to mark is our router here.
Images.length. Cool. Already caught a bug. Fix that. Run it again. And now it's going to say, hey, I'm trying to run without a router. I don't know how to do that. Why? Link.
Exactly. Link
this,
there.
which comes from React Router DOM, depends on a router being above it. We're trying to render it without a router.
We're trying to render without a router, exactly.
So in this particular case.
So what you can do? We can is provide a router for that, or like link that can be.
What you're going to need to do is you need to come back to your test, and you have to wrap this with a static router.
With a static router here. Okay.
Okay, and then we're going to have to import static
from the React router
from, I think it's React Router DOM. Does that work? Or do I have to get it from React Router DOM /server? I think you do.
Yeah.
Okay. React Router DOM /server. This is just like a browser router that can work in Node, right? Because we're not spinning up a browser, so we need it to work in the Node.
That makes, and there's a lot of pipeline here, and there's a lot of pipeline here. So what happened here is this. Like so. Here. It also throws us an error here. You can pet GXX. Okay. In our pet ESX, we change for this. Alright. If image exists and image not length, blah blah blah. This is also that can be useful when you use TypeScript for that. So if Cardbug here, so in our pet, that's right, you get is this. And you got is this. We run our test again. Okay. Yep, that's right. Yeah, we run our test again in our terminal. Yep, PSS again. And it throws an error again. And it throws an error again. Because of link component. Okay. So since we are running because of link component, let me actually in fact doing this. Okay. And then we say because our link component. So since because of our link component. So since we are running exactly. So since we are running our tests in a node environment, happy dumb, we need to use is a component that runs in node, such as the static router. Something that I'm quite familiar with when it comes to do the server-side rendering. Holy moly. So here's when we wrap this, okay? Here's when we wrap this with our static router, I think is the name of it is. That actually this come from import. From our React browser or React router done server, and here we got is a static router for that. And now we can is what the okay. Okay. No. What if I want to move this line up? Okay. It's with Alt. Alright. Okay. If I want to select multiple lines, is with this. Command and Shift. Okay. If I want to move one line, it's Alt. There you got it. That's right. There you got it. So we save this. Okay, and then when we run this, it say, oh, I already passed that test for you. So bling, bling, no problem. And it is funny because you say something like this, and it failed. So once you save that, it actually auto-correct you properly for that. So in our pet test, the GSX, this is when things started to get a little bit hairy, especially when you need to provide some context or to say, hey, there's some components that I need to render here. Okay, I need to provide some context here, or any provider from that.
Okay, now I think our test is passing. You wrote our first passing test. Congratulations. We can now be fairly assured that our none.jpg will show up if we don't give it an image. Awesome. So let's make sure that it works with a non-default. So I'm going to say test displays a non-default thumbnail. Just another note for whatever string you put in here. Put the bare minimum amount of text necessary to know what test failed if this is red, right?
Okay. Another recommendation. Okay. Nifty detail. Okay. Or tip. Okay. Put this small amount of text when writing, when describing your test, so it highlights in red only that. It's more for visual.
Don't make it super verbose. Don't give me a novel about it. I don't want to read a novel. I just want to know what test broke.
Exactly. Don't write long text. Don't give me a novel about it. Okay, I just wanna know which test broke. Oh my god.
This is me like shadow complaining about former coworkers. I had this one coworker, bless their heart, would write novels. I feel like I had to like write a book report afterwards. All right.
To write a book report afterwards. Display a non-default thumbnail.
Pet equals render, same thing, static router. We actually probably could have just copied this.
Because here is that display a non-default thumbnail, and because we're going to show, okay, display a non-default thumbnail, because now we need is to pass is also image here.
Same thing here, except we're going to give it images this time. So 1.jpg, 2.jpg, and 3.jpg. Okay, so now we have a pet. Const pet thumbnail.
Pet thumbnails equals to let me await for when you find that ID, or in this case,
looking for thumbnail again. Expect pet thumbnail,
especially only one
to contain 1.jpg.
1.jpg.
Pet.unmount. Oh yeah, this needs to be async as well. Async. Thank you.
Exactly. So here what we're going to do is to now wrote another tests here. So don't give me a novel. So don't give me long. Don't write long text. Don't write long tests. Don't give me a novel. Just want to know what broke. Okay. So this is display non-default. Display non-default. Display a non-default thumbnail. Okay, but only one. Exactly.
Default.
Display a non-default
Just another note for whatever
thumbnail.
Here. Put the bare minimum amount of text necessary. Just want to let's do that.
So here, because we only want to test that by making this an async. This is just a convention from writing a lot of tests. Is that okay? Here we're going to now get the component that we want to test. In this case, our pet, which is I want you to now provide these helper functions around this component, which is the render that come from the testing library in React, from the static in our case, because this component actually render is or make use a something called link, which is part of the React router. So if we because we are running is our component in a no environment like GS or Happy Dong in this case, using this minimalistic Dong implementation, okay, that works very well for the vast majority of tests. And here we're gonna render is the pet, okay, makes sense. But now in this case, because we want to show non-default image, for our case we're gonna pass this image, okay, and here we're gonna pass is something like an array, okay, which contains one.jpg, 2.jpg, 3, and then 3.jpg, right? So with that, all right, okay, so now I'll render. Okay, so with that, now I want is to get this element to make the assertion to expect the particular value, which is pet thumbnail. Let me wait for that element until you find that. The pet dot find test by ID or find by test ID, which is the thumbnail, something that we already put in that component. So by using the data dot test ID, and we provide that data dash test ID and the value of that, we're making our test much more robust because we don't rely on HTML and CSS implementation. We can put it that in another tag and that actually work as expected. So we're making our test work independently, which is a great thing. Okay. So we got pet thumbnail here like that, and then is where we're gonna make our assertion or expectations. Hey, I want you to expect that the pet.thumbnail source, which is where we're going to test our thumbnail, it is to contain is at least one element here, which is JPG for that. And then because again because now VTest can run tests in parallel, something we don't have with Jest, now is mount that component. So pet that mount. So to make our component much more easy and fast. As you can see, actually it passed all of the tests, right? Good. So for example, if I put here something like 4, that's right, it's going to fail, and it tells me, hey, assertion expect error, expect 1 GPG to include 4 GPG, right? And it's gonna tell you which test actually failed. Display a non-default thumbnail, and now you say, okay, we wanted to make that this test happen, to display some default, display a non-default thumbnail, okay, and this is what we get, and it's actually blazing fast. Okay. We wrote another test. Okay. And our final file will look like this. Pet.test. Yep, totally. Okay, awesome. Awesome, totally awesome. Oops. We got a pad.test. Okay. Oh.
.jpg and 3.jpg. .jpg. Test pass.
Okay, that was quite
Next
interesting.
section here is going to be testing some UI interactions. So far, we're basically testing if I give it the correct properties, do I get the correct thing out of it?
Mm-hmm. So with testing a component is the value proposition of this. Okay. Okay, we can say the value proposition. The value proposition here. Exactly here. So the value proposition is testing component is if I pass you something.
Right. Next section here is going to be testing some UI interactions. So far, we're basically testing if I give it the correct properties, do I get the correct thing out of it?
Proposition, value proposition. So if I get the proper properties.
Next section here is going to be testing some UI interactions. So far, we're basically testing if I give it the correct properties, do I get the correct thing out of it?
If I get the proper properties, do I get the proper output out of this? That's basically the value proposition of this. Value proposition of testing component is that if I get the proper property, do I get the proper output out of this? Okay.
Right. If I give it the correct images, will the user be displayed the right images? Very valid test. Let's go with carousel. If you remember in carousel, I say.
Here we're going to make is this testing user interaction. Okay, testing user interaction. So testing user interaction, like so. What the flag is this? Okay, then we got is this testing user interaction.
Some UI interactions. So far, we're basically testing if I give it the correct properties, do I get the correct thing out of it, right? If I give it the correct images, will the user be displayed the right images? Very valid test. Let's go with carousel. If you remember in carousel, I say npm run dev here. Going back over here to my adopt me, I click on Luna. If I click on this one, I expect this image to change, right? If I click on this one, I expect this image to change to that, right? Let's say that we had a regression that a user, every time they click on just the second photo, for whatever reason, that one doesn't work. Let's write a test to make sure that we can click on everything and it works. So please make another file in your...
Okay. So now let's go with carousel interactions. Okay. So now let's go with carousel interactions. Exactly. So if I receive, let's assume, let's assume that so let's assume that if I get a proper value, so let's assume if I click this, so let's assume that if I click on the carousel, okay, the thumbnail image is not showing properly. So let's make a test. Okay, things started to slowly it's progressive, bro. It's progressive. Yeah. So let's make a test for all of our carousel image that gets display properly. So by writing this test, we can now
That one doesn't work. Let's write a test to make sure that we can click on everything and it works. So please make another file in your test directory, call it carousel.test.jsx. Every time they click on just the second photo, for whatever reason, that one doesn't work. Let's write a test to make sure that we can click on everything and it works. If I click on, every time they click on just the second photo, for whatever reason, that one, click on this one, I expect this image to change to that, right? Let's say that we had a regression that a user, every time they click on just the second photo, for whatever reason, that one doesn't work. Let's write a test to make sure that we can click on everything.
Okay. So by writing this test, we can now avoid to make a regression, since we, okay. So by writing this test, we can now avoid to make a regression, since this, okay. So by writing this test, we can now avoid to make a regression. That's powerful. Okay. So by writing this test, we can now avoid to make a regression. Okay, cool. We can now avoid to make a regression, since this was a bug. So since this was already tested. Okay.
.jsx.
Import full screen. I really love that this being very expressive.
Here from Jasmine and Jest. Expect and test are not available globally, right? So you do have to import them from vtest. I'm going to argue that that is better because now these have types. And even though I'm not writing these in TypeScript, I still get all the type information from it. I like it better. Plus, it's just better to be explicit about it.
And also, I prefer to be, it's better to be explicit here.
We'll make them globally available, but just please don't. Unless you're like migrating from Jest to vtest. Yeah, don't do that. You shouldn't do it in Jest either, to be honest with you. But that's behavior that came from Jasmine. Import carousel from...
So this behavior comes from Jasmine.
/carousel. There we go. Test. Let's users click on thumbnails to make them the hero. Async.
Okay, let user click on the thumbnail to make them the hero.
async function, that is. Okay, const images equals 0.jpg,
which is now this is another component.
2.jpg, 3.jpg, however many of those that you want. I'll leave that at 4. Const carousel,
Which is where we're going to add the wrapper for our carousel.
equals render. We're going to make a carousel.
Carousel here.
Images equals images.
Images
This
here.
one we do not have to wrap in our static router because there is no React.
There is no React router inside
other
that.
stuff inside of carousel.
Mm-hmm.
So this is fine as is.
Let me actually double check, man. Let me actually double check if that what you say is true. This is a class component, that is. We're gonna handle is this user interactions. Okay, and what I want to do is to show is what is the active animal in there. Okay. Alright. So anytime we now click on this element here, so on here, on the image, on click, okay, so anytime we click on this image, I want now to check if the image that we set active is indeed the actual image that we did. So anytime we click here, we expect to have the proper image here. Pretty much that's what our test will look like. So when we do click here, we expect that this image to show here. How can we do that?
Const hero equals await carousel dot find
Which is
by test
the
ID. Hero.
Or
and
hero
first
image.
We're gonna put one expectation here of hero.src to contain
is
images 0, right? So whatever the first one is that we put in here, we expect by default that should be the first thing that we show the user, right? Cool. That's one. Then I'm just gonna write a for loop here to just test each one of them individually.
exactly.
So for let I equals 0, I is less than images.
I is less than image.length. Okay.
Plus,
And we need to iterate through all of those elements, and
const
then
image equals images I.
count image here, images I.
Const thumb equals await.
Count thumbs, and here is when you're going to now wait for the carousel
to
find ID, which is the where we're going to now do the interaction here.
Thumbnail I. So I'm going to go and put test IDs on all of these here in just a second.
Okay.
Await.
And then I want to await for the thumbnail to click
So
exactly.
the browser simulate clicking on that.
Exactly. You're simulating the like. Oh, okay. Because when you select that, now it is this wrapper conveniently exposed you this set of properties
You
for
have to
it.
wait it because that's a user interaction. It's not instantaneous. Okay. And then I'm going to say expect hero.
Expects to now the hero source to be is
to contain
or to contain is the image on that there. To contain the image in here, exactly. To contain is the image. To contain is the image.
Image.
Exactly.
And then I'm going to say expect array from thumb dot class list.
Oh, okay. This is you want to actually check this now the CSS element.
Contain active. So what have I done here? What's happening is where is this? What's that?
So what happening is that it's going to click on each one of them.
Click on is this one, right? So that's a valid test. Make sure that if I click on the active one, nothing happens, right? Then it's going to click on this one, make sure that this changes. It's also going to make sure that you see how this is grayed out, right? It has the active class on it. If we inspect image here, you can see here it has active. The other ones don't have active on it, right? So it's checking to see, does it also get the active class as well? Now, what I'm not doing here, which I probably could write a test that would be just as valid, you could check to make sure that all the other thumbnails do not have
Do
the
not
active
have
class.
active, exactly. You can check for all the other thumbnail, do not have the active class.
Because you can imagine some bug where I click this one, then I click this one, but this one doesn't get the active class removed, right? We're not going to do that, but feel free to go and explore that if you want to. And then it's going to do that. So we're going to end up with what, like these 4 assertions. So this is 2 assertions per that, plus this one. So we'll end up with 9 assertions in one test, right? It's pretty cool. Here I didn't do it because I don't think we need to because we don't have multiple tests running here, but you could say carousel.amount as well if you want to. Okay, so let's go and put our test IDs in here. So we're going to go to carousel.jsx.
And
the
in
hero
that is where we're
image
gonna put
here.
the
We're going to
source.
add
Data.test ID is the
hero.
hero.
And
in
to each one of these images, we are going to put
data.test ID
equals
equals the thumbnail and the I in the index.
And then we need to get that index. Oh, we have the index. So thumbnail index.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and now we should be able to run npm run test.
So that's something interesting because now we are testing is user interactions here. It's interesting. Here we create the carousel test with test.gsx. Okay, and here one of the things that I love from here, exactly now it's failing, is that I want you to follow me along here. Okay, cool. You are not able to see me, it doesn't matter. But the great thing of this is that now you can be explicit about what are the functions you want to use on this test. This is something that is now being used on VTest. Jess actually exposed all of these global features for you. So it was this kind of interactions, pretty much like Node, okay? As well as JavaScript in the browser, where they have all of these features that they don't expose to you. But now with Vite, we can actually be more explicit about it, and I will argue that this is better to write your test, to write your code. And we have this. Yes, we have that behavior because we inherit that from Jasmine. Let's get into it. VTest expect in test. Okay, that's great. I also want to import here is the render, which is this nice little helper functions around our components, comes from testing library React. You can imagine that you can use this with Vue, Angular, and other frameworks. Okay, in our case with this, which is the render, great for that, as well as our component that we want to render here, we want to test, which is carousel, and this is when our tests begin. Test. I want to now remember test the user story. Here we want us to test when user click on carousel. That may be one way to put it. Okay. Yep. That might be one way to put it. Let user click on the thumbnail.
To make them the hero.
Okay. So let users, again, as a user story, so let users click on carousel and let user click on thumbnails. I'll let user click on thumbnails, on the carousel thumbnails. Okay, let user clicks on thumbnails to make, okay, let user click on thumbnails to make the hero. To make them hero. And because here we're going to now test user interactions, what will happen when this change, or what will happen when the user click on here, it's going to show on the hero, the first element, the second, the third one, the fourth, as you can see that. Now as a rule of thumb here with this, Now we have things like this. Let user click on thumbnail to make them hero, which is the async, that kind of thing. And here when we say, okay, cool. Let user click on thumbnail to make them hero. Okay, async. Here is when we say, I want to now create the carousel here, where we're going to now wrap the carousel here, the carousel. Oh my god. Okay, the carousel, but because the carousel expect some property here, in this case is our image. Okay, we can do something like this. We can pass this image as image. We don't have that data structure. Now let's time to make it. Let's time to make it. Let's time to make it. Okay. So we have carousel, and then we have also our images. Here count images. So this can be 0.jpg or 1. As a string 1.jpg. Okay. 2.jpg. Okay. As well as 3.jpg and 4.jpg and so on. You can put all as much as you want. Okay. Because now we're going to test individual elements that happen here. We need to say, hey, first I want to now grab that element, grab the hero, okay, and expect that I have is the element here as none or 0 here, which is what we expect to have that, because now we're passing is that array, so we expect that to have is the first element in there. So here we're saying, I want you to now get me the hero, and here we say hero, and for get that element, because this is an async operation, we have to wait for the DOM to search and get that. That is carousel.find by the test ID. In our case, it'll be called hero. Okay. And I want you to make an exception or an assertion or expectation. Hey, I want you to this hero dot source to contain is the 1.jpg. And then, because we are not running multiple tests, but we can do that, we're not going to do anything else for that, right? Of course, it failed as expected, because it say, hey, I don't find any element what you mentioned that, right? Find element ID is like, unable to find element data test ID hero, as you can see here. And it's pretty good descriptive. It's very good descriptive. So we can do is this. In our hero, here we say, hey, I want to now add this particular tag, data dash test ID equals hero. Okay. You save this, and there should be no error for that. All tests pass successfully. So okay, but again, this is just one test, and now we're going to now iterate through all of these elements to actually updating is the proper image. So here we say, hey, for all elements here, I usually draw my O4 for all elements. I want you to start from 0 with the where that index is where that index is less than image dot length. Okay, and after you iterate through one element, I want you now to go to the next one. Oh my god. Blank box. Okay. Good. There you got it. So now we got this. Okay. Ba 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 ba. And here, okay. We're gonna do this. We're gonna get our image, or in this case we say let image. That'll be the image here and index on that position. So now I get that image to the position, and then exactly get that image in that position, and there now it is time to look at those elements on their component that are rendered here, which is hey from the carousel, or in our case we can say hey cons thumbnail. Okay, thumbnail, and then we say okay, so what is the thumbnail here? What is the thing about this? It comes from the carousel. Find by test ID as well. Okay, that match with a thumbnail, and this thumbnail must have something like this, so we can easily put the thumbnail, so we can easily identify them with the index here using the template string. So we're passing is this some thumbnail and an index here. Okay, and now I want to make click on that and check the hero that actually contained that image, which is hey let me, because this is an async operation, we're finding that we have to wait for that. Okay, as well as wait for this user interaction, which is our carousel, or in this case thumbnail click. Okay, and now we're going to make the expectation or assertion. Okay, I want to, or I expect that the hero dot source, okay, to contain is the image at that position. Okay, to contain the image at that position. And you can also expect here with the class name, we say array that from of image. Okay, and now you want to, okay, and I want you to thumb class list. Okay, array dot from. Okay, thumbnail, or you can say thumb or thumbnail, because after all we actually is making a thumb. Okay, thumb classless okay, because we're getting is only one, So I want to at least one of those elements here to contain is active. Active. To contain is active. Okay, to contain is active. Here is throwing me an error, which is say, hey, I don't know what does it mean by a thumbnail in that zero position. It's like, I don't recognize that. Oh, it's because I need to paste that here as well. Here we say data dash test ID with the name of our ID, which is in our case is the, we can say something like this, like thumbnail right, like thumbnail here with the index like so. It is complaining about that because it's saying, hey, no, it's supposed to be something like this. It's not recognizing that, no problem. We can do something like this. I want you to now recognize this expression here. So by putting things like this, you say thumbnail, okay, and the index here, exactly. You can also do something like this. Or you can is, instead of doing that, you can do something like, oh my god, no. You can do something like this and pass that as a template string. Yep, so this actually is a valid for that. And this is how you can now write is a user interaction test. Carousel.test.gsx. For that. No, but this is from the pet. In fact, we want to do this for the carousel here. Okay. And then you got it.
Right. Because you can imagine some bug where I click this one, then I click this one, but this one doesn't get the active class. Right? We're not going to do that, but feel free to go and explore that if you want to. And then it's going to do that. So we're going to end up with what, like these 4 assertions. So this is 2 assertions. I didn't do it because I don't go and put our test IDs in here. So we're going to go to carousel.jsx to the hero input of these. We need to get that index. We have the npm run test breaks. Does this fail? So what happens if I forget to put the active class on there? Test fails, right? Put the active class back. Test passes. I don't know. This is a pretty compelling test to me, right? Like it's actually going and testing user expectations to make sure that the user expectations are being met. A+ high fives all around, right?
A+ high five for all of us.
Let's go test a custom hook.
Ooh, here we go.
Part of the reasons like writing custom hooks is great is because they become individually testable. Whereas if it's just like
okay. Okay. So far so good. In fact, that'll be all for this video. Or I think I can move on to the next one. Yeah, I think I can move on to the next one. To the custom hooks.
It's really hard to test that. So we have use read list here. So the old way of writing these kind of tests.
Testing custom hook. Testing custom hooks. Okay.
test with like use breed list and things like that, you actually have to like fake the component, right? I can show you how to do that really quick if you want to. Let's just do it. Create a new file here. We're going to call it use breed list .test.jsx. This one has to be a JSX because we're going to write JSX in it. All right, so import expect and test from vtest. Import render from @testing library /react. Import query client and query client provider.
Okay.
From tanstack query.
Exactly.
And import finally use breed list from /use breed list.
Okay, because that makes a lot of sense, because now we're not testing this. Okay, we are testing this with React query, bro. We are testing this. We're testing things with React query. That makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense. That's good. That's good. In fact, we can, for example, yeah, that's good. In fact, we can say is that, hey, git status. Okay. You can say, hey, GitHub here. Something like this. There you got it. That's one of the things that I want to take a look at. That it's like, Okay, update right by time and driver app for new dispatch. No, yeah, that's pretty compelling. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, yep. Ba ba bum. I think. Okay. So if we take a look now at the resource here, which is the course repo, and now, for example, component context CSV. And in testing, Oh, but I think this is okay. Course website, course project file. Okay. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. Mm-hmm. 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 Okay. Makes a lot of sense. Okay. Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay. CD is testing. Get in it. Okay. Here and inside of this. Okay. 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 Mm-hmm. That makes a lot of sense. Okay, so we can take is now the context here. Mm-hmm. Which is on the context here. Exactly. Adopted pet context. Yep. Okay. Context. Okay. Okay. Cool. 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 Open up here this. Mm-hmm. And close this. Okay. Click this. Sorry, not sorry. Auth provider. Carousel. Where is our code here for that? But this is now we have migrating that to all TypeScript. That's interesting. Lol. 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 We migrate all of that to TypeScript. Where we already have okay the format and the kind of thing. I think that will be interesting to write or test here. Totally. I think that'll be very, very interesting to write our test here on the test here. There you got it. All right. So we can now, here is close the context here. In fact, open this, say, hey, let's going to open now this as part of our context here. Please don't save anything here. There you got it. We're going also is to now run this, say test, and here we say, hey, let's go to the functions of npm and vtest. So everything is on here, npm run t. Okay, we need to install is a proper version of our makes sense. We need to install is a proper version of our vtest, as well as the TypeScript library or the testing library, and also the DOM, the node implementation of our DOM, which is happy in this case. It makes a lot of sense. Okay. Now we install them is when we can now run that. We say npm run def, npm t. We're gonna run our test, you're gonna fail because we don't have then properly assigned to that. You say, hey, I don't recognize document is not defined. And there's some couple error here. So like document is not defined. Like say, hey, what the F is render here? Because we need to actually tell, hey, the test runner, it'll be using this environment called happy-dom. Okay, and now you should actually run. There are some errors there, but now it's not about the DOM. It's about is the where are you going to put those tests in there. So for example, if we take a look at our pet here, this is when we need to paste here this very convenient test called test data test ID, and call this as thumbnail. Okay, like thumbnail. Okay, this is one. It say, hey, I fail another test, but in this case it's because I don't identify something called like this on carousel. Again, let's go for carousel. Let's go for carousel here, and now decide to add those nice convenient tab when we're going to test that. That makes a lot of sense. Data dot test ID. Here, this is the hero. Okay, and here in this image where we're going to now test our user interactions, which is data test ID, and this is our thumbnail. But here I want to make use of this to say this is a thumbnail, where we're gonna pass is the index here. Okay, like so, but it say, hey, I don't recognize is this expression. Yeah, I don't recognize that expression here without this thing here. If you insert them here, I might be able to recognize them like so. And now our test should pass without any issue. Oh, of course, pet failed because we haven't actually fixed the bug here. We can do it for our case is if image exists, like so. Now it's done. Okay, and there you got it. That's how easy you can change from one test to another. Yep, that's how easy you can change from one test to another. All right, so now let's go to test our custom hooks.
Let's go test a custom hook. Part of the reasons like writing custom hooks is great is because they become individually testable. Whereas if it's just like an effect in the middle of a component, it's really hard to test that. So we have use breed list here. So the old way of writing these kind of tests with like use breed list and things like that, you actually have to like fake the component, right? I can show you how to do that really quick if you want to. Let's just do it. Create a new file here. We're going to call it use breed list .test.jsx. This one has to be a JSX because we're going to write JSX in it. All right, so import expect and test from vtest. Import render from @testing library /react. Import query client
and the query client provider
from tanstack query, React query, and import finally use breed list from /use breed list. We're gonna have to make our default query client here really quick. Const query client. This is just like a React Router DOM where React query requires to have a query client and a query client provider, so we have to kind of fake that for it. So query client is basically going to be exactly what we do in our app.jsx equals new query client. Default options, queries, stale time, infinity, cache time, infinity. We are going to add one more thing to it, which is retry false. By default, React query will try 3 times and then give up. We don't want that in our test. If we're testing if it fails, we want it to just fail. We don't want it to retry. Okay. Function, we're going to write this function called getBreedList, and it's going to take in an animal. We have this problem when we're testing React hooks, that hooks only work inside of a React component. So how can we test use breedList outside of a component? The answer to your question is you cannot. It only works inside of a React. So how can we test use breedList outside of a component?
How you can test use breedList outside of a component? If you define that inside of it.
Only work inside of a React component. So how can we test use breedList outside of a component?
No, you cannot.
The answer to your question is you cannot. It only works inside of a React component. So we're going to make a React component. So we're going to say let list, and then we're going to write function test component, and say list is assigned use breedList animal, and then return null. Kind of cheating, right? This is technically a valid.
List, use breedList animal, and return null. So you are you're creating a federal is a test component here.
React component, right? And then all we gotta have to do is render it. So we're gonna say render query client provider. Client is assigned query client, and then we're just gonna render test component. Right? This is going to go through all the life cycle. It's going to call use breedList, and then it's going to save the list here. So then all we have to do down here is return list. Kind of silly, right? It's a bit of like sacrificing the right goat. But now that we've done all this, we can write like a little test down here. Gives an empty list with no animal provided. async function. Okay, and then all we have to say is const breed list and status equals get breed list with nothing, right? And then we're going to say expect breed list to have length 0,
0.
expect status to be have loading. I don't remember what the status is supposed to be, but loading sounds appropriate to me. Lo and behold, it works, right? If I say 1 here, it's going to crash. If I say 0, it's going to. We had to write 37 lines of code to test 8. Not great. It was a pretty simple hook. And once you write something like this, you can test any hook this way, right? And this is how we used to have to write things like this. Luckily, now with testing library, you can actually get something out of it that allows you to test hooks directly without having to do all this faking stuff. So let's try
Because
to
that's what you're
show.
doing is a lot of faking here.
So we're going to expect and test, render, we got that, query client provider. We need all of this stuff. You do need the query client. You can delete all this get breed list stuff. Okay, and instead of doing it, we'll just rewrite this test totally.
And then they just
Now we're
provide
gonna
us
say
a
const
nice
result.
little wrapper.
Let's assign render hook. We got render from testing library. So instead of render, we want render hook. This is relatively new. This is new since I last taught the course, I think. And you just give it a function of what you're trying to get out, right? So this is all we're going to need for that. And then we have to we do have to give it a wrapper, right? So this is going to be a function with children. And this is where we can give it query client provider. The query client is assigned query client, and you just give it children in the middle of that. There. Okay? All of this rigmarole will end up with result, and result will be whatever you expected back from the hook. So now I can say const breed list status is assigned result.current, and I can say expect breed list to have length 0, to have length 0, and expect status to be loading. So, all right, we failed. What happened here? No query client set. Did I not set that?
No query client set.
Did you install a dependency?
For the render hook?
Yeah.
No, so it's built into testing library React now.
Oh, you didn't have to install testing library /React hooks.
That is the old one. That one does not work with React 18. That is what version 7 of this course used to teach. Use breed list. No query client.
No query client set. Use query client provider to set one.
Set. So that's the part that I don't know why it's unhappy about, because it is. It's there.
Rerun that.
Query client provider. Query client. Query client. Oh, it's not query client. Sorry, it's just client. There we go. Sorry.
Okay.
So I had here on line 19, I had query client like this. It's not query client, it is just client. That's
Okay.
all. Good.
This is another new way of how you can test your
So
custom hook.
far, all we're testing in this use breed list test is an empty array. Which here, carousel. No, carousel, not use breed list. That's part of the story, but we want to test like that it calls the right API, that we get back the right information, and that it presents the user back with the correct information, if that's the case. The problem here is that under the hood, this use breed list is using fetch breed list, and fetch breed list is using what? Fetch. I don't actually really want to hit my API, right? You can imagine a case where like everyone's running all their tests and you're just hammering your production API. Not a good idea. It'd be great if we could mock it. So in general, I don't suggest mocking too many things. The one place where I'm like, okay, you can mock that, it's API requests. I'm okay with you mocking fetch, basically. There's a ton of ways to do this. I'm just going to show you the easy way to mock requests. Just do npm install -D vtest -fetch -mock. This is very similar to jest fetch mock 0.2.1. There's other ways to do this. You can actually just go write a mock for yourself. They're very, very simple pieces of software. But YOLO, I don't like doing it, so I'm not going to do it. And I'm not going to make you do it. Okay, inside of test, inside of your Vite config, just put setup files. And we're just going to make a setup file really quick. It's going to be called /setup vtest.js.
Okay.
Make a file inside
Of the source.
called,
Exactly.
as you might have guessed, setup vtest.js.
So you might have guessed.
This is just a file that would get run before all of your tests get run. So if you had other environmental variables to set, this is where you would do it. In our particular case, we're just going to import, create, fetch mock from vtest fetch mock. We're going to import vi from vtest. We're going to say const fetch mock is assigned create fetch mock vi fetch mock dot enable mocks. This is going to now universally enable mocks on fetch throughout your entire application. Your entire test suite is probably more accurate.
Exactly, the entire test
I
suite.
forgot what VI precisely is. It's the vtest utilities. Okay? So it has things that create fetch mock, goes and sets all of the correct things up for you. I've never used it directly, but that's exactly what it's doing. Okay, now we have all that enabled. We can go back to our tests, here in use breed list.
Use breed list.
Okay, up here next to render hook, we're going to grab a function called wait for, and then we're going to, down here at the bottom, write our test. So we're going to write a test of gives back breeds.
Give back a breed.
When given an animal. Okay, and then we're going to give it dog, which is going to give us back our function. This needs to be an async function.
Completely.
Okay.
Because now we're going to
just give a
test
bunch of
is
breeds.
API endpoints.
Rather than type all of them, I'm just going to copy and paste all these breeds that I have here. But feel free to write your own. I just grabbed some of them that I made in the API here. So Havanese, Bichon Frise, so on and so forth. And then here we're going to say fetch dot mock response once. Okay. Here we're just saying next time fetch is called, respond with blah. You can be more specific of like they must call this particular URL. We're not going to be so clever, right? We're just going to say mock response. The next one just blindly spit this back at them. Animal, dog, and breeds, right? So respond with this.
Exactly.
Okay. Now we can come up here and copy and paste.
With fetch. So now we are globally, our mocking is our fetch.
This business, because I don't want to write all this again.
For our test. Okay. Okay. So now we are globally mocking our fetch. So now we are globally mocking our API here. Makes sense.
And the only difference here is const result render hook. Instead of giving it an empty string here, we're going to give it dog. Okay, this will give us back our result. Now we can't just go test this right away because it's going to go do fetch, right? Fetch is not synchronous, so it's asynchronous. So we have to wait for it.
We have to wait for it.
Hence, wait for is what we're going to use. We're going to say await, wait for, then you're going to give it a function of what it's waiting on. So in this case, we're going to give it a test of expect result dot current 1. And if you remember, this is a hook. If we look at, let's look at our test really quick here. Breed list. The first one is the breed list. The second one is the status. So we're going to wait until the status is success, right? So let's do that. Wait for result current 1 to be success. So this is going to wait until this ends up happening or until it times out, one of the two things. And then after that, we can say const breed list equals results result.current. And then here I can say expect breed list to be equal
to the breed.
Okay, so it's going to be equal to this, whatever we got back from the API. We're going to expect that to come back from our use breed list. So let's save that. Let's look at our tests. And we got an error. Okay, well that's different. Well, that is yet a different thing. Let's check out what's going on here. So we have gives back breeds when given an animal.
Exactly, it's giving an animal here. Okay. So there's this back here. So fetch
mock response
mock
once,
response.
JSON. Oh,
Mock response on with dog. Must be.
oh, yes, that's what it is. JSON.stringify. Right, this needs to be,
Okay.
it doesn't give you back an object, it gives you back a string, which then fetch then decodes for you. There we go. And now, there you go. That's a passing test.
That's one of the reasons where you have to be very good at this.
So that is how you can test asynchronous function. I showed you with like regards to hooks and custom hooks and that kind of stuff, but that works with components, that works with anything that you have to mock fetch with vtest or jest. We used vtest mock fetch. There's also a jest mock fetch that works precisely the same way.
Mm-hmm.
I am not a fan of seeking 100% test coverage because I think it's dumb. I think it's dumb because for the most part, you don't need 100% test coverage. There's things that you just don't need to test. But if you want to, I'm going to show you how to cheat. There's a thing called snapshot testing, which in general I think is a bad idea. But it's built into vtest, it's built into jest, and it's very easy. So what snapshot testing, it's low effort, low confidence tests. So they're very easy to write, but they inspire very little confidence. So cheat tests that don't do much. Now you have to ask yourself, is that a good thing for me? Do I like that? For me personally, they're too noisy for me, and I also don't get very much value out of them. But I'm going to show you how to write them nonetheless. So let's do it with results.jsx. I want you to create a file here, results.test.jsx. Here we're going to import, expect, and test from vtest. And I'm going to import render from testing library React. And I'm going to import results from /results. Okay? Test renders correctly with no pets. Async function doesn't have to be async, but I just make it async anyway. Then we're going to grab this thing out called asFragment equals render results pets equals empty array. Okay, and then we're going to say expect asFragment, which is a function, and you're going to call this magic function called toMatchSnapshot. Okay, as soon as oh, what happened here? Oh, it just doesn't have any tests, which is fine. So if I save this, it's going to say, hey, I wrote a new snapshot for you.
Exactly.
Then you can look in the snapshots directory up here, and you can see that it renders out this document fragment here of what this looks like rendered to HTML directly. And then now, every time that I run this, it's just going to compare this to what it was previously, right? So it's going to say, okay, this is what I saw last time. Does this look exactly the same this time? So to prove my point here, let's look at results, and I'm going to put no pets found with a bunch of exclamation points, and I am going to get a failing test. Why?
Because it's not.
Before I said no pets found. And
Exactly,
now it says no
in
pets
this
found,
match.
exclamation point.
Yeah, that's silly test.
That's exactly what it says it is. Like, I'm going to take a frozen snapshot of this, and then I'm going to compare this in the future that this is what I expect to see. Now, what I can do here is like, I can go and say, you know what, this is actually what I expect, right? I want this to now match that. If I just hit you now, it's going to be like, all right, you're the boss. I'm going to tell you now that that's what it's going to look like in the future. So now if I open this again, notice that it says, it's okay.
There's a wrong.
Yeah, don't save. Please refresh it. And now if I say snapshot, you can see here, now it actually says what I have here. Do you think that's useful? Maybe, sometimes. If you had something that truly you never really expected to change, and for some reason it was changing underneath you, by all means, this could be a valid use case for that. For me, this is just testing that my UI is not changing, and I also expect my UI to change. I used to write a lot of these so that I could get 100% test coverage. I don't think that's useful anymore, so I don't write very many of these. The one thing I can show you here, let's go back and look. This is writing to match snapshot, to match inline snapshot. Now I'm going to save this. It'll actually write this directly here if you don't want to have a separate file. That's up to you. Some people like that better, but that's totally up to you. What was I going to say about that? Yeah, I don't write too many of these anymore. But I wanted to show you how to do it in case you wanted to know how to do it. It is, some people find it very useful. This is snapshots is not just for React, by the way. You can do it with like JSON, for example, right? So if I have some JSON API response that I'm expected to not change over time, I can just give it a JSON object instead of a document fragment, and that'll work as well. But as you can see, 2 lines here of testing stuff, generates a test. Some people are really into that. I'll leave that to your discretion. So this is doing with no pets. If you want to see what it looks like with pets,
No,
let's just go nav this
no,
cover,
I
so
won't
we'll
definitely
sample
go
it here
with.
and grab really quick.
No. I won't definitely go with
So let's go grab the
snapshots. It's
sample
like
data.
they're silly.
Literally just took this
No,
directly
they're
from
not
the
providing any
response.
value. Data will change, that kind of thing.
There we go, grab an API response. We'll just say right here, blah equals blah. We'll have to import static router as well. So import static router from React Router DOM / server. Okay. And then down here we'll write another test that looks relatively similar. Test renders correctly with some pets. And here you can say const as fragment equals render static router results pets equals pets, and then expect as fragment to match snapshot. There you go. You'll see that it wrote a snapshot. We can go back and look at our snapshot file, and you can see here it's rendering out that Luna rendered correctly with Dog Avenue, Seattle, Washington, so on and so forth. So that's what that would look like. Let me tell you my minor problem with this. What happens if I change something in pet? Let's just go do it, just for funsies. So I put, I changed these from M dashes to normal dashes or something like that, something really silly. Or I'll just put name like this. All right, so now my tests are going to fail. And this is going to fail because it says Jacqueline and Lida and C and all those kind of things. Which test is failing? The results test. Where is there the problem? The pets component. The wrong test is failing, right? When I have a test fail, I want to know exactly what's wrong. This one gives me some indirection of what has gone amiss. I don't like that. I want my test to be very specific of what I'm testing. There's something you can do to get around this called shallow rendering, which we would have to go grab another library called React Test Renderer, and you can do like a shallow render. So instead of actually rendering everything down to the pet level, it'll say, basically instead of that, it'll say that this is trying to render a pet, you know, with all the props, right? I'm not going to type out all the props, but it'll actually give you the name of the React component as opposed to the actual full HTML. That's a bit better. If you're going to be doing lots of snapshot testing, I would suggest going to do that. I show you how to do that in V7 if you want to do that, but I've decided to de-emphasize snapshot testing in this course because I don't think it's a good idea. I want you to be aware of it because you're definitely going to come across at a company that does it.
Exactly.
But use at your own peril. Does that make sense? Does this make sense? Okay. 2 things about snapshot test. You do check them into Git. Some people are hesitant to do that. Like most people say, like, don't check in machine-generated files. These ones you do check in, right, because you want to check them later, right? So it's important that you do check these into Git, and never modify them directly, right? I think that makes sense. These should only ever be machine-generated. Please do not edit them by hand.
Greg Online just said, I found that snapshot tests work well for API integration testing on a test API end.
Yeah, no, I could buy that.
Yeah.
To Craig's point, I believe that snapshot testing is a much better use case in making sure that your JSON
Let's also make sure that the JSON's response
shapes are
shape.
not changing between your client and your server. It's basically like you're giving a guarantee from the back-end developer to the front-end developer, like a handshake agreement. This is what this looks like. Our tests are going to fail if these drift apart. That is a super valid reason to use a snapshot test, and one that I've done before. So, yes, I agree with that.
But not for the UI.
But this is, yeah, it gets you towards 100% test coverage, right? So I'm going to go look at we're going to look at test coverage here in just a second. It's going to show results.jsx as being 100% test covered. What did we test? Nothing, right? That's why I don't like test coverages, because it doesn't really tell you anything. Like I could cover this entire application in 5 minutes with a snapshot test. It would show with 100% coverage, and I would have 0% confidence in my tests. Your tests are only as useful as like how much effort and thought you put into them. Okay, that's enough of me ragging on snapshots.
But there are certain companies that are actually still using
Let's go
the
through
snapshot.
coverage, now that we've been talking about it. I think it's interesting to look at coverage. It's also cheap now to look at coverage. It used to be hard to set up in Istanbul. It's now very easy to set it up. So I think it's useful for you to look at, but don't let it be gospel. Like that's why I don't like companies that say like we maintain 70% test coverage. It's silly. It's a silly number to try and chase.
Exactly.
But it is useful to look at the report and see like, oh, okay, here's a bunch of things that I find very important about my app that are not being covered. That is very useful information for you to have. So let's, okay, here's a bunch of things that I find very important about my app that are not being covered. That is very useful information for you to have. So let's go ahead and set that up. We're gonna go back to our package.json momentarily. We're gonna add another script here under vtest called test::coverage. And all you're gonna do is vtest -- coverage. Yes, yes, yes.
Coverage.
You can spell, ooh, that was a rough go of trying to spell coverage. All right, there we go, coverage. Here we go. So stop this, and then I want you to run npm run test::coverage. It's going to ask you, do you want to install something, and just say yes. Just like that. Do you want to install vtest coverage -c8? The answer is yes. Okay. It's going to give me this like really nice little output here of like, here's all of the files that you are covering with your tests. Here's how many percentage of statements that you're covering, how many branches, how many functions.
Okay, how many statements you have covered? Except how many branches?
How many lines.
How many
You can
functions?
see that in catch, or what is this? Use breed list? Fetch breed list, thank you.
Fetch breed.
Lines 11 through 13 are not covered. So fetch breed list here, 11 through 13. We don't cover that this error gets thrown correctly, right? Probably okay. So that's pretty cool. But like, if you go here and there is a coverage, source/coverage.
Oh,
and I think
okay.
there's an index.html in here. Yeah. So open that in your browser. This will actually give you like a nice interface. So I can actually go in here and click in this, and I can see, okay, this is what's not covered, right? This was covered one time. This was covered 2 times. If we go back and look at something like carousel, you can see like this line was hit 20 times. Like that's what those X's mean. How many times these were hit? So on and so forth. So you can see all of these files are covered. It's giving me a really rosy result right now, but it's not showing me all the files in my project that are not covered, right? So you can see here, for example, modal.jsx is totally just omitted here because I don't have any tests for it. But of the things that I've written tests for, I have 98% test coverage from my statements, right? And 100% function coverage, so on and so forth. So if you've ever used Istanbul or NYC, which are relatively the same thing for the most part, this should look familiar. This is called an LCOV report, LCOV. I do not know what it stands for. This is actually being generated by a different test coverage tool called C8. I would suggest now, if you're on Istanbul or NYC, to just move to C8. C8 is actually the built-in test coverage tool to Node.js, so it's actually built into Node. It's much faster than Istanbul. Istanbul is single-threaded and sequential. It's very slow. They made NYC, which then became multi-threaded, or like at least could be run in parallel is maybe a better way of putting that. And then now there's C8, which is actually built directly into Node.js, which is way faster because it's in C, right, or C++ or something. But you can see here, it's compatible with test reporters for Istanbul. So the rest of your pilot pipeline will look exactly the same. Okay, makes sense? Any questions about that? Like I said, this is a very useful thing. For me, let's say I had like, I don't know, looking here at fetch breed list, let's say that this error was very important. I could go in here and look at my test coverage and say like, hey, this is critical functionality. Now I know I need to write another test to cover this piece of functionality. That lets me know, am I covering the things that I find important about my app? I got one more thing to show you here. This is going to be specific to VS Code for just a second. I have a tool, I have an extension installed called the vtest.
Okay. So with that, that'll be all for this video. Take care. Bye bye.